Imagine waking up in your small, tight-knit community to find your neighbour accusing you of dancing with the devil. Imagine watching as your friends, your family members, even children as young as 4 years old are dragged away in chains, condemned to die based on nothing more than the hysterical screams of teenage girls and the spectral evidence of invisible spirits only they could see. This isn't fiction. This isn't some medieval European nightmare. This happened in 1692 in Salem, Massachusetts, supposedly the New World where people came to escape religious persecution. In less than 1 year, mass hysteria consumed an entire community, leading to the deaths of 25 innocent people and forever changing how we understand the terrifying power of fear, superstition, and mob mentality. But here's the question that still haunts historians today. Was Salem really just mass hysteria? Or was something far more sinister pulling the strings? Welcome to Nightmare Narratives, where true history bleeds into horror and the strangest legends might just be real. If you like the eerie, the unexplained, and the downright disturbing, hit like and don't forget to subscribe. Some stories are too dark to forget. Welcome back to the channel. Today we're diving deep into one of America's darkest chapters, and trust me, the truth is more disturbing than any horror movie. Picture Salem Village in 1692. It's a harsh, unforgiving place where Puritan settlers lived under constant threat. From Native American attacks, from brutal winters, from diseases that could wipe out entire families. Life was already precarious. But what happened next would make their worst nightmares seem tame. It started with two little girls, 9-year-old Elizabeth Parris and her 11-year-old cousin Abigail Williams. In the dead of winter, these children began experiencing what can only be described as terrifying fits. They would scream uncontrollably, contort their bodies into impossible positions, bark like dogs, and claim that invisible hands were pinching and biting them. But here's where it gets really strange. The local doctor, William Griggs, examined the girls and declared, and I quote, "The evil hand is upon them. Not illness, not trauma, witchcraft." Think about that for a moment. A medical professional in what was supposed to be an enlightened colonial society immediately jumped to supernatural explanations. This wasn't medieval Europe. This was supposed to be the new world of reason and religious freedom. Now let's talk about these girls, because their identities and motivations are crucial to understanding what really happened. Elizabeth Parris was the daughter of Samuel Parris, Salem Village's controversial minister. Abigail Williams lived in the Parris household. Soon, other girls joined their circle: Ann Putnam Jr., Mercy Lewis, Mary Walcott, and several others. Here's what's fascinating and deeply disturbing. These weren't random children. They were connected to some of the most powerful families in Salem Village. The Putnam family, in particular, had been feuding with other prominent families for years over land disputes, church politics, and social status. When the girls' fits continued and spread to others, the adults didn't seek medical help or try to calm the situation. Instead, they demanded names. "Who is afflicting you?" they asked. "Who is the witch?" And the girls delivered. They pointed fingers at Tituba, an enslaved woman from Barbados who worked in the Parris household. They accused Sarah Good, a homeless beggar who was already an outcast, and they named Sarah Osborne, an elderly woman who rarely attended church and had scandalized the community by living with a man before marriage. Notice the pattern. The first three accused were society's most vulnerable members: an enslaved woman, a homeless woman, and a social outcast. This wasn't random. This was calculated targeting of people who couldn't fight back. But here's where the story gets really complex, because Salem wasn't just dealing with hysterical children. Multiple factors created the perfect storm for this tragedy. Religious extremism. The Puritans lived in constant fear of Satan. They believed the devil was literally walking among them, looking for souls to corrupt. Every misfortune, every illness, every crop failure could be evidence of witchcraft. Their entire worldview was built on the premise that they were under constant spiritual attack. Political tensions. Salem village was torn apart by internal conflicts. There were disputes over Minister Samuel Parris's leadership, fights over land ownership, and deep resentments between farming families and the more prosperous merchant families in Salem town. These weren't just neighbourhood squabbles, they were existential battles over power, money, and social status. Economic anxiety. The community was struggling economically. Harsh winters, failed crops, and ongoing conflicts with Native Americans had created severe hardship. When people are desperate and afraid, they look for someone to blame. Gender and social dynamics. Most of the accusers were young women and girls, while many of the accused were older women who didn't conform to Puritan ideals of femininity. Women who were outspoken, who owned property, who challenged authority, or who simply didn't fit in became targets. Legal system. Perhaps most importantly, the colonial legal system was completely unprepared for this crisis. They accepted spectral evidence, testimony that accused people's spirits were attacking the afflicted girls, even when the accused were physically elsewhere. Imagine being convicted of a crime based on someone's dream or hallucination. As spring turned to summer, the accusations multiplied exponentially. What started with 3 marginalised women quickly spread to include respected community members, church leaders, and even the wife of the deputy governor. The so-called afflicted girls became the stars of this deadly theatre. They would attend trials and dramatically react to the presence of the accused, screaming that the defendant's spirit was attacking them in that very courtroom. Judges and juries, believing they were witnessing supernatural battles between good and evil, convicted person after person. The executions began on June 10, 1692, with Bridget Bishop, a woman who had been accused of witchcraft years earlier and was known for her unconventional behaviour. She was hanged on Gallows Hill, becoming the first of 20 people who would die. But here's what's truly chilling. As the trials continued, the accusations became increasingly wild and desperate. The girls accused a 4-year-old child, Dorothy Good, who was imprisoned for months. They pointed fingers at ministers, respected merchants, and even suggested that the devil had infiltrated the highest levels of society. The mass hysteria had reached a breaking point where literally anyone could be accused, and everyone lived in terror of being the next target. So what was really happening here? Modern psychologists and historians have proposed several theories, and the truth is probably a combination of all of them. Mass psychogenic illness, also known as mass hysteria, this is a real psychological phenomenon where groups of people develop similar symptoms without any identifiable physical cause. The girls' fits may have started with one genuinely distressed child, then spread through the power of suggestion and social pressure. Deliberate manipulation. Some historians argue that at least some of the accusers were consciously lying, using the witch trials to settle personal vendettas or gain power and attention. Anne Putnam Jr. S. family, for example, had clear motives for targeting specific individuals who were their enemies. Ergot poisoning. One fascinating theory suggests that ergot, a fungus that grows on rye grain, may have caused hallucinations and seizures. Salem's location and climate were perfect for ergot growth, and the symptoms matched those reported by the afflicted girls. Trauma response. Life in colonial Salem was brutal. These children had witnessed violence, death, and constant fear. Their fits may have been genuine trauma responses that were misinterpreted as supernatural affliction. Social control. Perhaps most disturbingly, the witch trials may have served as a way for the community's power structure to eliminate threatening individuals and reinforce social hierarchies. Notice how many of the accused were women who challenged traditional gender roles, or people who held property that others wanted. The madness finally began to end when the accusations reached too high into the social hierarchy. When the afflicted girls accused the wife of Massachusetts Bay Colony's governor, William Phipps, people in power suddenly realised that the trials had gone too far. In October 1692, Governor Phipps dissolved the special court and prohibited further arrests. By May 1693, he had pardoned all remaining accused witches, but the damage was done. 20 people had been executed, several others had died in prison, and the community was shattered. The aftermath reveals the most disturbing aspect of the entire crisis: how quickly the community tried to move on and forget. Many of the accusers later recanted their testimony. Ann Putnam Jr. publicly apologised in 1706, claiming she'd been deluded by Satan. Samuel Parris, the minister whose household started it all, was eventually forced to leave Salem. But here's what's really telling. The community paid compensation to the families of some victims, but they never truly reckoned with what had happened or why. They preferred to treat it as an unfortunate mistake, rather than examine the deep-seated prejudices, power structures, and psychological factors that made it possible. The Salem Witch Trials left scars that lasted for generations. Families were destroyed, the community's trust was shattered, and Salem became synonymous with injustice and mass hysteria. But perhaps the most important legacy is what Salem teaches us about human nature and society. The trials weren't the product of one evil person, or even a few malicious individuals. They were the result of an entire community's willingness to abandon reason, evidence, and basic human compassion in favour of fear, suspicion, and scapegoating. Sound familiar? Throughout history, we've seen similar patterns. The Red Scare, the McCarthy hearings, moral panics about everything from comic books to video games to social media. Every generation seems to have its own version of Salem, moments when fear overcomes reason and society turns on its most vulnerable members. The real horror of Salem isn't supernatural at all. It's the very human capacity for cruelty, the willingness to believe accusations without evidence, and the tendency to target those who are different or powerless. So, was Salem mass hysteria or something more sinister? The answer is both. It was mass hysteria fueled by very real, very deliberate social, political, and economic forces. The supernatural elements were fictional, but the human motivations behind the accusations were all too real. The girls may have started with genuine distress or deliberate lies, but the adults who encouraged them, the judges who accepted spectral evidence, and the community that turned neighbour against neighbour, they made the choice to let fear rule over justice. Salem reminds us that the most dangerous supernatural force isn't witchcraft or demons. It's the human tendency to abandon our moral compass when we're afraid, angry, or looking for someone to blame for our problems. The next time you see a community turning on its members, the next time you witness mass accusations without evidence, the next time fear is used to justify injustice, remember Salem. Remember that the real evil isn't supernatural, it's the choice to let our worst impulses triumph over our better angels. Thanks for watching. What do you think was the real cause of the Salem Witch Trials? Let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more deep dives into history's darkest chapters.